Welcome back to Morning Joe. Jill Biden has a real shot at becoming the nation's first lady, but that title would hardly define the accomplished educator, author, and mother. I sat down with Dr. Biden in Philadelphia yesterday for an in-depth discussion about her own journey, public and private. There are issues she writes about in her new book, Where the Light Enters, Building a Family, Discovering Myself. Here now is that conversation. So the book is so personal. I mean, at times it's even intimate. And it's also very clear in reading your story that you're not a naturally public person. You don't run to the cameras.
Right.
Why'd you write it?
You know, I didn't start out to write this type of book. I started out to talk about the incredible people that I met during our administration. And I talked to the publishers, and I started to tell them what I wanted, and they said, no. We want a book that only you could write. These are other people's stories. We want your story. And so I started to think about it. And I'm a pencil and paper person. And I just started writing and writing and writing. And then when I came back to them, I said, okay, this is what I came up with. These are the stories that I want to tell. This is what has happened in my life with Joe. And they loved it. Yeah. I mean, right away they loved it. So I knew I was on the right track.
You write so beautifully about life's joys and losses, often intermingling because of Joe's story and the two of you blending a family. So let me ask about that, because when you were having a baby, and you have hysterical stories in there about your mother's pregnancy, which is outrageous. That's just like my relationship with my mom, and I would have said that too. But absolutely. I would have made her write it down. But you brought the boys into it, Hunter and Beau.
I did.
I guess it was important for them to feel ownership.
Yeah. So actually, when I thought I was pregnant, I didn't tell Joe. I went right to the boys and I said, hey guys, you know, I think I'm pregnant. I think we're going to have a baby.
So how old are they?
They're little boys. They're like 7 and 8.
Oh my gosh.
No, maybe they were a little older then. Maybe like 9, 10. I'd have to figure it out. But so this is so funny. We got in the car and I said, let's go get a pregnancy test. And I was, you know, Joe was in the Senate, so I had to be careful that no one would see us.
Oh my gosh.
So I wore sunglasses and I put a scarf over my head, and we drove to the Rite Aid and I bought a pregnancy test, and I took it the next day, and I was pregnant. And so when the boys came home from school, I said, I'm pregnant, but I want you to be the one to tell Daddy. And so we waited, and when Joe got off the train and came home, they said, Daddy, we have a surprise to tell you. And they told Joe that we were going to have a baby.
Oh, my God. So he must have loved it that way, coming from the boys.
And they loved it.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted them to be a part of it. I didn't want them to feel like, oh, here's a new baby coming in, and what about us? And so it was important to me that they feel that they had ownership in it.
To bring the family together. On that, you also, you know, looming in your mind is the loss of a child. And you write about Naomi, the baby girl that Joe lost in an accident. You actually speak out loud about how hard that was for you to comprehend, especially having your own baby. And you write, in marriage, even a long one, there are some parts of yourself you visit alone. And you had to sort of see that in Joe. His life has been marked by cruel losses, and yet his faith in God and hope remains. After the loss of Beau, are you even more blown away at how he's able to do that?
At his resilience, You know, Joe does lean heavily on his faith. That's what gets him through so many tough times. And I think having suffered 3 losses, I do marvel at it, just because now that we've lost Beau, and I've experienced that myself, I know how difficult that is. And but that's, you know, it's just been, I don't know, he has a lot of fortitude, he has a lot of strength, and going forward, I think, you know, as we go on this next journey, I mean, I know that Joe is strong and he can handle anything that comes our way.
Everybody grieves differently. How did, I mean, you've raised these two boys.
Yeah.
You talk about how that bond is no different, whether it's a natural-born child.
Not different at all. As a matter of fact, I mean, I have to remind myself sometimes that I didn't give birth to Bo and Hunter. You know, it's just like, it's just so natural.
Yeah.
And I did write in the book where, you know, I think I never treated them any differently. Joe never treated them any differently. And one day Hunter said to me, Mom, I know you love us all the same because you yell at Ashley just like you yell at us. So they didn't feel any difference at all. And I think I worked hard at that. And I wanted to make sure that they all felt equally loved.
The passing of Bo, how it impacted you, you try and describe it. It's like life is just never the same, and you can be happy, but it's not as pure. How is every day without him?
Well, you know, a piece of you is missing, and you just don't forget it. I mean, it just doesn't leave you. It's not, you know, it's when you lose your parents, for instance. I mean, it's painful, yes, but throughout your whole life, you're conditioned. Your parents will.
Natural order.
Yes, it's natural order. But when you lose a child, it so throws your whole life out of kind of perspective, I guess. And I never thought Bo would die. I mean, I just, throughout his whole illness, I clung to that hope that he was going to live. And they said 1% of people who get glioblastoma, brain cancer, survive. And I thought, why can't he be that 1%?
Right.
And I was so convinced, because he was so special, that God was going to he was going to be the one. And until the morning he died, I mean, I just held on to that and never gave up.
Moving forward, campaigning with one less Biden just isn't the same. Is it in some ways for him? Does it feel like there's something about him that you bring along with you as you take on this new challenge?
He's with us every day, and you know, he was a politician himself, Attorney General. Yeah. And so when things would get rough on the campaign trail, I'd be calling up Bo and say, what do you think about this, and what do you think about that? And you've got to call Dad and tell him this or that. Or he'd do the reverse, you know, Mom, you've got to tell Dad. Yeah. So we were, you know, we leaned on one another a lot. And yes, there is always and will always be that empty seat at the table, that empty place in my heart, in Joe's heart, in our children's heart, our grandchildren. But I have to believe that he's looking down and thinking, yeah, Mom, do this.
Do this.
Do this.
So let's talk about it. Before we talk about Do This campaign for President Joe Biden, I want to talk about your job, because I love this story about your career as a teacher.
Oh, thanks.
And this is an incredible, I love this, reminds me of my life. You start off by going, on one Sunday morning in 2004, our house was struck by lightning and caught fire and burned down.
Yes.
And it's just like another day in the Biden family. And you talk, you know, Joe's on Meet the Press, and you're running around, you're in your robe.
Yeah.
The house fills up with smoke, the fire's in the walls, and you're running outside, you're shaking, you're trying to get the cat. The cat won't come out. She finally comes out. She disappears for 3 days. But in the midst of all this chaos, and your house is burning down, you go, suddenly a firefighter came toward me, calling, Mrs. Biden. I looked at him, dreading what was to come. What else could go wrong? What else could we lose today? Do you remember me? He asked. It's Harry. A giant smile spread across his face. He had been one of my students at Delaware Technical Community College. Yeah, Harry, I said, standing there drenched. I do remember you. He was a sweet kid who had taken my class twice. For a brief moment, I laughed at the absurdity of this reunion and felt a tinge of pride that he'd gone to follow his dream of becoming a firefighter. But also You're a teacher, a tinge of pride in being
Yeah.
a teacher and having
Yeah.
students, even then.
Yeah.
What a moment.
It was a moment, and you know, and one of the things that strikes me, I mean, that was, I hear from my students so often. I mean, they're just such a big part of my life. I'm still teaching. I was grading papers today on the train.
Love it.
And I have to post tomorrow.
Okay.
And but another funny part of that, I was so afraid to tell Joe, and I called Bo because he lived nearby, and he came running down the driveway. Mom, are you okay? And I said, I'm fine. And he said, let's call Dad. And I said, no, let's not call him because he's going on air. He'll be upset. Let's tell him afterwards. So we called Joe, and you know, when he came home, he came walking down the driveway. And I said, Joe, look at our house, it's burning. And he said, great, now we can fix all of the things that we made a mistake on when we built it. And so I think that just shows really Joe's sense of
Positive outlook.
positive.
He also
I
knew
couldn't
you'd be
believe he
dealing
said
with the
that.
contractors, though.
Exactly. Boy, you must have been there. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So you felt it was important to go back to teaching even when he became vice president. That's
Exactly.
very know your value. Tell me why.
Well, I didn't feel like I could really just live his life, and teaching is my passion. I love teaching. I'm still doing it after 34 years. And I went to him and I said, Joe, I've got to teach. And he said, well, yeah, go ahead. I think you should. And I talked to Michelle about it. She said, yes, go for it. And so I think it was like 7 days after the inauguration, I was in the classroom.
Wow.
And so it was really great. And not all my students knew I was second lady.
Yeah, so how did that work?
Well, I tell a funny story that not everybody knew, of course. My students, I just would write my name on the board, you know, and say,
Dr.
just
Biden.
call me Dr. B. I didn't even say the
Dr. B,
Biden
yep.
word. And so at the end of the first semester, one of the girls came in for her grade conference, and she said to me, Dr. B, last night I saw you on the television with Michelle Obama.
Oh, hilarious.
And I said yes, and she said, and I yelled to my mom, and I said, Mom, come here, this is my English teacher. And she came out and she said, that is not your English teacher. That is the second lady of the United States. So to this day, some of my students know and some of them don't know. And I just like to keep it that way.
An older student came up to you and said, I know who you are. And you said, and we're going to keep it that way.
Yeah.
That's just between you and me.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what's ahead. Because, I mean, if you become First Lady, I don't think you can be a teacher. I think it might just be too much.
Yeah, well, I would want to make sure that my students were safe, but boy, would I love to do it.
Really? It's your identity.
It is. It's my passion. It's what I love. So maybe we could figure out some way. I'm taking nothing for granted. I'm not saying, but if it ever happened, what would that say about the worth of a spouse, right? To be working. I mean, not that First Lady isn't a full-time job, because believe me, I've seen it up close. It is a full-time job.
We know people who know Joe Biden. We know Joe Biden. We know a lot of people who love Joe Biden. And so in terms of him running for president, some were worried out loud to us that maybe he's too old. Or maybe there's just no way, he could sustain losing for a third time. So what do you know about Joe that they don't?
Joe has incredible energy. He has incredible passion. Joe is a unifier. I think at this time in history, our country seems so divided, and people are saying to me all the time, Joe has to run, Joe has to run. We have to bring people together again. We have to unite people. And for those people who say Joe is too old, I don't think he's too old, certainly, but they'll have to, that's up to the voters, and the voters will make that decision when they see him out in the campaign trail, when they see him, when they meet him at their school or at a rally, or they'll make their own judgment.
His past experience running, some would say he's a hothead, he has these awkward moments, this and that, whatever. Is he wiser? Do you think that those experiences have brought wisdom to his approach? You know, what's going to make the third time the charm, do you think?
He is wiser. He's learned a lot. He's been vice president for 8 years. He got a lot of experience that way. And just being, you know, times have changed, and he's been out on the trail. He's learned a lot. And so going forward, I think he knows where he wants to go, and he's headed in the right direction.
And in closing, your family's been through so much, and he's going to be running against potentially the, I'd say, dirtiest campaigner that we've seen in our lifetimes. How will you protect your family from the pain that a presidential campaign can cause?
We have talked about that.
Yeah.
You know, we brought our kids and our grandkids in, and we told them when we decided to run, if you don't want Pop to do this, we're not going to do it. You know, but to a child, they said, Pop has to do this. He has to be president. He would make the best president. So we will do it like we've always done it, as a family. And doesn't mean it's not going to be hard. Doesn't mean my heart is not going to be broken when some negative comments come out about, you know, Joe and I are used to it, but not the kids. And it's going to be hard, but it's going to be worth it, because Joe's going to make a great president.
Dr. Jill Biden, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.